makes my hair stand up on end. It's very exciting, it's thrilling, I can't explain, it's like, to me it's a miracle.
I was crying, I was shaking. This wasn't just a childhood vision. I mean, it just verified what I already knew, that this was Jesus.
I can see it now in my mind. I can see the actual face. It was so beautiful.
What happened to me was more than a miracle. I honestly felt at that time I was standing beside the hand of God.
I thought, wow. And it took a few moments before it dawned on us what we were seeing and who we were seeing, though we hardly dare say who we were seeing. It was just amazing.
Driffield, East Yorkshire. The parish church has stood here for 800 years. But in 1998, it began to draw Christian pilgrims from far beyond the village. It began with a chance visit by a Salvation Army worker.
It was Good Friday, about 3 years ago, and we'd done a march for Jesus through the town, which we do every year, and it really poured down that day. And we came into this church for shelter and to do the kiddies service, and I was quiet as we took off our wet things. And a dove cooed, and I just looked up and I saw this, what I thought was an image of Christ. Blinked thinking it would have gone again. But no, it was fantastic, it was still there, and it's still there. I can't explain the feeling that it gave me. And I thought, oh, Christ, there's lots of people walking in darkness, but in Driffield it's real, it's here. Christ is here.
I can understand that people can look at it and with an imagination say, yes, that is a face. And being in a church, perhaps someone says, oh yes, this is the face of Christ. Perhaps if it were a synagogue, they might say, oh, it's the face of Moses. I don't know. I can't say. But in any church, you worry about marks on walls. Is it the damp? Is something wrong with the outside? So you look up there and think, well, have we got a leak in the roof, which has caused these marks to appear on that particular stonework?
Theories differ. Some believe the image is the result of damp, others say it's the natural aging of different types of masonry. But the woman who first saw it has no doubts.
If it was damp, surely it would have either smudged or gone or something, it would have changed, but it's not changed at all. It's just the same as it was 3 years ago when I first saw it. Whenever I see this image, whenever I come in this church, it makes my hair stand up on end. It's very exciting, it's thrilling, I can't explain, it's like, to me it's a miracle.
Miracles, optical illusions, or wishful thinking. Such images attract worldwide attention, but no one can say for sure that they prove God's existence. What is certain is that the phenomenon is increasing. Stories of miraculous images were first recorded in the 3rd century AD. Early Christian writings tell of divine sightings in the clouds, on walls, and on parchments. Today, the visions persist, often in the most unlikely places. In the last decade, Christ's face is said to have spontaneously appeared in shadows cast by leaves. inside a mother's womb alongside her unborn baby. Even on the turf of a football stadium. It sparked a new debate between believers and skeptics.
I think that these physical images and shrines provide tangible evidence for the divine for these people. They are the proofs that convince them of the reality of their religion. They are often intended to confound the skeptic. How do you explain this, they say, pointing to it. This couldn't be just an accident. This looks just like the face of Jesus. From the point of view of a paranormal researcher such as myself, these are easily explained as, we might call an ink blot effect. We call them simulacra, meaning similar to. These are images that the human imagination basically imposes on some random stain or pattern that looks vaguely like an image of Christ, a face of Christ, or so on.
Such visions are often experienced by those who already believe in God. In 1999, members of the Holy Cross prayer group in Leicestershire became involved in an art project.
All the organisations in our church were asked to prepare something for an exhibition showing the work of our church. We really didn't know what to do, so we decided to produce a poster. And I asked Shirley if she would paint the picture, her interpretation of the Holy Spirit. I just used watercolours, and I just done it very quick in blue and white paints. Actually, while I was painting it, I was saying the Lord's Prayer. A couple of hours after, I just rolled it up, put it under my arm, walked across to Anne, who was only across the road, and then said she would put the printing on. And the next day, our friend phoned up and said, "Anne, have you seen the face on the poster?"
As I looked at it, I saw this face, which I thought, oh, it must be a trick of the light, and moved, to the other side to have a look, and then I walked round and came back and looked at it again, and it was still there.
My initial reaction was, wow. And then there are no words to describe, because you can hardly believe what you're seeing.
Seeing a face in random shapes may bolster some people's religious beliefs. But is there a rational, psychological explanation?
The brain is especially wired up to be particularly sensitive to face perception, more so than the perception of any other object. This explains why mothers can recognise the face of a newborn baby within minutes of it being born, compared to any other baby. And given that fact, that we're especially sensitive to faces, it's probably the case that in stimuli that are unclear or ambiguous, we are much more likely to see a face than any other object.
You either believe it or you don't. And whether you do or whether you don't is your choice. It's so easy to be sceptical about them. And you really have to see there and be there to realise that it is something that is from God. It's spiritual, it's not supernatural. It is a spiritual happening from God.
As the number of Christ-like visions increases, the surroundings become more bizarre. These are the stains left on a cleaning cloth. This is the discoloured marble of a garden pot. These are the burn marks left in a tortilla, the supposed divine image now preserved in a shrine by its owner.
Certainly, it's picked up in recent years, in my estimation, because of the mass media. Now, if someone sees a image in a fungus growth on a tree in California, that will be picked up by the press, often as a sort of novelty, and it will be disseminated widely. People may see pilgrims lined up visiting the site on CNN. They may see them in their morning newspaper. And that encourages other people to go out and keep an eye out for a miracle image in the wood grain of their door, or a stain on a floor. We've seen these, and simply one of the most ridiculous was, in my opinion, was a stain on the floor of a toilet in the back of an auto parts store in Texas. Now that seems to me an unlikely place for a holy image to appear, but who am I to judge?
Some images may seem easy to dismiss, but there's no questioning the effect they can have on those who see them.
That was about 2 years ago in February. I'd walked out to get an armload of wood, and as I was coming back towards the gate, I happened to see a reflection that, to me, it looked like the aura. Was a circle of aura inside the wheelbarrow. I kept my eyes up on it. I walked up on the wheelbarrow. I dropped the wood by the gate, and when I got within 3 feet, my body got tremendously hot. I turned, looked back to call for my wife. She wasn't there. I looked back at the wheelbarrow. The aura was gone, and the face of Jesus was in it. And then I looked back and ran inside the house to get my wife. And when I got in there, she says, "Honey, what's wrong with you? You're as white as a ghost."
The look on his face, the color had just gone from his face, and his eyes were really big. And I said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "You look like you've seen a ghost." Just joking, you know. And he just kind of grabbed me and took me out back, and he says, "What do you see in the wheelbarrow?" And I saw it instantly.
And she said, "I see a face of a man." And then she looked back and says, "Oh my God, it's the face of Jesus."
And I knew that something had happened right then, but I didn't know what to do. And kind of like, oh my, why is this in our wheelbarrow? It's just a wheelbarrow.
Across the United States, similar visions have led to crowds eager to share the experience.
It wasn't real clear, but it was clear enough that you could make out the image.
I've seen it lots of times, about 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay.
And I've seen it this time too. It's real.
I think these phenomena can snowball and people start gathering to view the phenomena, and it begins to resemble a little bit like medieval pilgrimages. But when large numbers of people, like-minded people, come to observe a phenomena, you're also getting a group effect where people will tend to egg each other on in terms of what they're seeing. So people are not just coming perhaps because the phenomena makes them feel closer to God, but there's a group effect going on, influencing their perception of what they're seeing, and probably also they're getting a great deal of social support from the fact that a group of like-minded people have come together and are being moved in a very profound way by this experience.
Various religious images are seen on everything from tree bark to rust stains on this or that. One famous one was an image of Christ and what appeared to be a small boy in the rust stains on a soybean oil tank in Ohio. Another famous one is the picture of Jesus imagined in a fork full of spaghetti on a billboard in Atlanta put out by Pizza Hut, and this attracted great throngs, and is just an example of a kind of not mass hysteria, but sort of a bandwagon effect, a contagion, as psychologists might say, in which people are hyping to each other, this is the place to go, here is a miraculous image, no matter how unlikely the place is.
These images are rather crude, and even if you believe they look something like the face of God, they're certainly imperfect. They're not breathtaking in their meticulousness. And one has to question whether an omnipotent God would bother creating images like this when artists on this planet can do much better work. So there's a fundamental issue about whether these really can be the face of God, given how imperfect they are.
I've had, over the period of 2 years, I've had approximately between 2,000 to 5,000 people come to see the wheelbarrow. They're totally blown away with it. They cannot believe what they see. They want to go up and hug it. I've had some want to give donations. It's just I don't accept donations. This wheelbarrow, this sighting, is for people to enjoy, share, and that's all I want to do with it, is share it with everybody.
Holy images may be on the increase, but if they are real, what purpose are they meant to serve? In part 2, we meet the people who've been helped and inspired to help others, following their own personal visions.
I look back and think, well, it was a testing time, it was a learning time. It happened to me, there's nothing I could do to change it. I saw this beautiful image, and this image gave me the strength to go on. So I've turned something very negative into something very positive.
Ask people what Christ looked like, and this is how most will describe him. But the truth is, no one knows. Jesus and his disciples were Jews who obeyed the second commandment, which forbids the making of holy images. And the Gospels, written in the century after his death, contain no descriptions of his physical appearance.
Well, insofar that we have never been given a pictorial representation of Jesus that we can say, oh, we know that's who he was. We're very dependent on what artists have portrayed down through history. It's very interesting that for the first 200 or 300 years, there's virtually no portrayals, or no, as far as we are aware, of Jesus. So I am extremely cautious about people who feel the need to have a vision of Jesus. They say, oh, now I know what Jesus looks like. Because the Bible's concern is not what he looked like, but who he is and what he did.
In the first Christian carvings, Jesus is depicted very differently from the way we recognize him today.
The earliest representations of Christ are not portraits at all. They're symbolic images, like the cross, like the fish. The fish, for example, is a symbol based on the Greek word ictus, which is, of course, fish. The letters of which are the initials of a phrase meaning Christ, Son of God, the Saviour. So the image of the fish becomes a kind of emblem of Christ and an emblem of the belief of the Christians in who Christ is. Also, he's represented by the cross, by various other symbols. But perhaps the most moving image that one sees, for example, in the catacombs in Rome, the burial places of the early Christians outside the city walls, are these images of Christ as the Good Shepherd, Christ carrying the lost sheep on his shoulders with his flock beside him, an image which speaks about what Christ does. He looks for the sinner, he looks for the one who is lost. It's about what Christ does rather than what he looks like.
It wasn't until the Middle Ages that artists began painting the familiar figure with long hair and beard. They're said to have been influenced by actual images of Jesus, images which appeared spontaneously during his life.
It's very interesting that early on there do appear images which have supposedly miraculous origins. I'm thinking, for example, of the Veronica. This is the cloth which one of the holy women placed over his face to wipe away his sweat as he made his way up onto the Mount Calvary on his way to being crucified. And imprinted on the cloth was left an image of Christ. Now, this isn't a gospel story, of course, it's one that's grown up later on. But there are several images which claim to be the Veronica. Perhaps the story which is most to be trusted is the one of the Veronica image which is currently in the Vatican, although I understand it's impossible to actually get to see it. Now, this Veronica image inspires a whole series of repetitions, of copies, and gives, as it were, the orthodox, the officially approved image of what Christ looks like.
It's an image recreated on 1 million posters, paintings and church walls. And for one woman, it provided help and inspiration in her darkest hour.
Tonight, Stephanie Slater is safely back in the arms of her parents. Earlier today, 25-year-old Stephanie relived the moment she realised that a house viewing appointment had turned into the nightmare every female estate agent dreads.
It was in 1992 that Stephanie Slater was abducted at knife point. The man who kidnapped her was the murderer and blackmailer, Michael Sands. He held her in his workshop for 8 days, raping her, blindfolding her, forcing her to lie in a coffin inside a dustbin.
I was very, very cold, absolutely freezing cold, so much so my body was shaking. I was thinking about family and friends, I was crying, I wanted out of there. He told me there were electrodes in the box to electrocute me and boulders above my head to crush me if I tried to move around. So obviously I was in terrific pain, very scared. I was shaking, I was crying. At this moment, I thought, I'm going to die in here. That's it, I'm going to die. This is my time to go. Well, 25 years old, thanks, you know. And while I was looking in the darkness, I did actually see a light coming towards me. Now, this really shocked me because I'm not a religious person. I don't really used to believe in things like that. And then this point of light got closer and closer to me, and it got bigger and bigger until it was right by my face. And as I looked at it, I was absolutely shocked to see it was the face of Christ himself. But the minute my mind realised who he was, all my pain went. My back was in agony, I was freezing cold, my hand was cut, all the pain from these ailments faded away and went. And then that was my most deepest hour of need, and then it had left me again. But it had taken with it some of the severe pain, because the next morning as I woke to the radio, I couldn't feel it as bad. So it had touched me, as it were. It had given me either some strength or some warmth or some spiritual healing or something, but it had given me strength. The face of Christ that I saw that night was very similar to a picture of the cloth of Veronica, which hangs in God's Church on the Isle of Wight. And it's beautiful. The minute you walk in the door, it just comes to you, it just stands out to you, you can see it straight away. And when I go up to the picture and I just look at it, it is so similar to the face of Christ that I saw. It's not exactly the same because the face I saw was real, was living, was breathing. But if you look into the eyes of this picture, it's fantastic, and you get a tremendous feeling of peace around you. And I often look at it and have a little smile to myself, thinking, I've met you, and I'm really proud to have done so. And I can never do enough not only in this lifetime, but in 1,000 lifetimes, to ever thank you for being there for me that night.
Sheer terror. Absolute sheer terror.
9 years after her ordeal, Stephanie is dedicated to helping other victims of crime, advising the police on how to support them through their trauma.
I look back and think, well, it was a testing time. It was a learning time. It happened to me. There's nothing I could do to change it. I saw this beautiful image, and this image gave me the strength to go on. I followed its advice and did go on. And to the present day now, I help other people who have been victims of crime, people who need help in general. So I've turned something very negative into something very positive, which helps me a lot. And it is a great healer as well to me, and it's very positive for me to do.
I think in some cases, these experiences have been a profound spur and a stimuli for people to go off and change their lives and start doing good works. And perhaps it's because these experiences remind people of the transcendent and make them feel that there's more to life than just their own personal, individual, selfish needs. So again, these experiences are extremely profound. They have a bigger impact on people's lives than practically anything else, and often they're a very positive experience.
Some who've experienced visions believe they are exhortations from God to help others. When images appear on days with religious significance, their influence can be all the more powerful.
Good Friday is a fairly sombre day in the Christian calendar. It's the time for a lot of meditation. I worked in the morning, came home at lunchtime, and decided to collect the pots up and use the dishwasher. A few hours after the dishwasher had been put on, I emptied it. As I picked the two glasses out of the dishwasher, the glass in my right hand was dirty. Everything else, including the glass in my left hand, was sparkling, gleaming, and just one glass was dirty. And I couldn't understand why one glass out of a dishwasher was dirty. There was nothing over it. So I picked it up to see the figure, a Christ-like figure on the side of the glass. When we looked closer at the image and held the glass up to the light, the image is like an X-ray. And as you rotate the glass round, you can see the folds in the cloth on the arms, the sandals on the feet, a skeletal type form under the robes, and the facial features quite clearly. So it was quite scary.
A week later, another glass and another image. This time what looked like a lion's head. The images had appeared shortly after a visit to Kenya, where he was moved by a visit to a psychiatric hospital.
I think you get a peace in your own mind that you accept these glasses for what they are. They are images, probably made by food particles, but resemble something that's very close. And the second one, the lion's head, is the symbol of Kenya. So the significance of the visit to the mental hospital in Kenya, the Christ-like figure, the lion's head, just spurred us on to get going, collecting equipment for the mental hospital.
Any time that what you're seeing is special, whether it's seeing a UFO or an apparition or an image of Christ, then that's something that's going to be profound in your life. It's going to, usually it will be something that one can't see every day, that's special. And if it's religious, it may seem ennobling, it may seem somehow to heighten one's sense of the religious and the miraculous, to make oneself even special and important, so that it's difficult to underestimate the power of something that's allegedly supernatural. And people want it to be special and powerful, and so they bring this expectant attention to it. And they're usually not disappointed. If they want it very much, they will pretty much see what they want.
But are people who want to believe in divine visions being tricked? In part 3, we look at some of the most famous images of all.
My own investigations into a number of these photographs imply that many of the originating photographs were actually fakes.
The ability to see human faces in random shapes is shared by most of us. The phenomenon of seeing Christ's face is known as pareidolia.
The sudden appearance of an image, that is, they recognize a pattern in this abstract form, is a very powerful moment. And I think all of us have actually experienced this, as say when we're children, seeing a face in the curtains or something like that. And these moments often strike us with terror or a very deep, unsettling feeling, because they are unnatural. And in that sense, they appeal to the religious, because it's something that is unnatural is a miracle.
A lot of the stimuli that people are seeing the face of God in are stimuli like clouds or dust. These are objects that move randomly. And it's highly likely just by chance that when an object or a large number of objects move randomly, that occasionally they will come together to form shapes which look like things like faces, and perhaps, given the face of God is such a common image, the face of God.
Snowfalls can also cause people to experience divine visions. Half a century ago, a pilot is said to have taken a photograph while flying over the Alps. The resulting picture commanded worldwide fascination.
Well, when I first saw it, I didn't see that much in it. Somebody threw it down on my desk at the Sunday People office in London and said, what do you think of this picture? And I looked at it and I said, well, not very much. Snow. I thought it was a holiday snow. And they said, can you see anything else in it? Well, I said, not a lot. And they said, can you see a face? And I couldn't see a face, quite honestly. I couldn't see anything other than snow on a mountain. Then they told me to concentrate on the dark part of the picture where the snow had melted. And suddenly it hit me, smack in the face. It was there, it was as clear as a bell. It was a picture of Christ in the snow. I don't know where the picture originated from originally. It's a mystery to me where it came from. All I know is that it was taken from an aeroplane, taken from a fair height. It was a scene in the Alps. Who took it, how it came to us, I don't know. We first published it in 1958, and it got such a reaction from the public. That was the avalanche reaction, if you like, when everybody was coming in on it, they'd seen it for the first time. And then we ran it again, I think in about 1977, we ran it again as a big spread. And we said it was the most famous picture we'd ever run. And I suppose it was. I imagine 30, 40,000 people actually bought copies of that picture from writing in.
But is the photograph and the story of the pilot genuine? One journalist has investigated the origins of the picture. He says it surfaced in a number of guises throughout the last 80 years.
I think it's more proper to call it the most famous photograph that claims to be a photograph of Christ. I know of possibly 40 or 50 cases where people have stepped forward and said they had taken this photograph, or one of their relatives had, or some friend who had some religious experience or was dying. And again, variously, either the camera was said to have gone off by itself, or they heard a voice saying, "Take this photograph now." And when it's developed, of course, they see this image. I had traced back to 1920. It first appeared in Canada to a woman called Mildred Swanson, who said she was taking not a pictures of snow, but a lovely flower bed. And of course, with black and white film, it turned out to be very grainy, and in the pattern, she said she saw this figure that we are quite familiar with.
The picture of Christ in the Alps is a stock picture of various books on the unexplained and the miraculous. I think it looks too good to be true. It looks a little bit like it might have been doctored or faked. But I can't say so because I don't have an original. And the evidence, therefore, is simply, as we would say, not before the court.
If it's a fake, I don't think it's a very good one. Because A, you had to look hard to start with to see it. And with a fake, they'd have made it a lot easier to spot. I mean, anybody would be able to spot it. And remember that we're going back now to the time before trick photography. I mean, nowadays, you can do anything with a camera. In those days, the camera didn't lie. What you saw was what you got. And in fact, that picture was not, it hadn't been tarted up, hadn't been touched up. It was a genuine picture.
Controversy also surrounds another equally famous image, the so-called Christ in the Clouds photo.
There is an image of a robed figure in the clouds, and there are various stories to go with it. This picture has circulated for decades. At one time, it was said to be an image of a ghost. Another time, an image of an angel. Another time, of Christ himself. It's a headless image, so it's just a robed figure, and one can make of it what one will. There has been a computer analysis done of it that suggests that it isn't a real cloud. It lacks the sort of three-dimensional quality of a real cloud, and it's probably originally a fake of some sort, but it's been kicking around. And from time to time it shows up, and someone claims that they just made the picture themselves out of a plane window or during a hurricane or whatever, and there are various stories about it. I think of that one as a sort of pictorial urban legend.
My own investigations into a number of these photographs imply that many of the originating photographs were actually fakes. In saying that, I don't want to detract from the intensity and the meaning of the belief that people have put into these photographs, because they have obviously meant something very strongly to the people who've taken them and who still hold them and regard them as objects of, divine inspiration, really.
Carmen Ellis has no photographs of the figure she saw in the clouds. But more than 20 years on, the mental image remains fresh and vivid.
I saw Jesus in the clouds when I was 8 years old. My mom and I were standing out in my backyard. I was looking up at the sky, and I wasn't looking to see anything. He was just there. It was a beautiful cloud, like a statue. It was the perfect form and shape of Jesus. His arms were outstretched like this, and his head was held high, and I could see the tassels on his belt. I could see the holes in his wrists. I could see the straps on his sandals. I mean, that's how clear it was when I saw this.
She now shares her experiences with others via the internet.
I started my website about a year ago after a very hard time in my life. And this experience brought me back to Jesus, in a sense. I think it was his way of saying hello. Hi, I'm here, remember me? And out of this came the idea for me to tell my story and to publish it on the internet. I did so much research and surfing, and I found pictures that was so similar to what I saw, almost the same thing.
Around 54,000 people have logged onto the site. Photos submitted include a picture inside the clouds during a violent storm. There's an apparent image of Jesus in a tornado, and there's a holy cross in the clouds.
Everyone is looking for Jesus, whether they really admit it or not, or something. They're looking for peace. And I've learned that a lot of people can find it at my website. They find peace and in the knowledge that Jesus is there and he's real. When I look back at what I saw, I feel honored, I feel peaceful, I feel proud and thankful. It's just a wonderful thing that I was allowed to see this.
For people like Carmen, these are true images of God. But do the mainstream churches share their faith? Texas, California. Whilst rolling out a tortilla, a woman spots what she sees to be the face of Jesus.
I think it's a miracle. To me it's a miracle.
In Russia, a seemingly divine image appears on a church wall and pandemonium breaks out. These are just some of the Christ-like sightings from around the world, but the skeptics are as dismissive as ever.
Well, I would ask, why on earth would God bother? We've got the ozone layer, we've got massive global problems, we've got climate change. The way we treat each other isn't very good. There are all sorts of wars going on. It seems to me that God really should have more important things on his mind. If God's going to intervene in that way, then I think there are more pressing things for him to intervene about.
Such a reaction may be expected from secular society. But what of the religious community? Mainstream Christian churches readily accept the visions that are described in the Bible. But when it comes to these so-called modern-day miracles, they are reluctant to endorse them.
I don't think the Church of England as such has a formal view on these things. You take it, case by case. The reality is that these things do occur, and they have to be tested. It has to be subject to critique. And the critique needs to be, is this in keeping with the teaching of the Christian church as we find it in the New Testament? If it is, then we want to take some notice of it. If it isn't, then we don't simply say, you had it, you must be right. We must all fall down on our knees and say, this is God. It may not be.
In fact, the C of E has endorsed none of the images which people have claimed as the likeness of Christ. Equally, the Catholic Church refuses to acknowledge them as true visions of God. It's left to fringe religious groups like the growing charismatic movement to lend support.
I think if people are genuinely seeing something and other people can come alongside them and go, wow, I can see that too, clearly, from a scientific point of view, they are seeing something. Now, who would make themselves known in such a way? It must be a supernatural being. It wouldn't be a human being, it wouldn't be an animal. So this must be someone living in another dimension altogether. So now you go back to your creator, the father of the universe, the mother of the universe, the person who is wanting to make themselves known. And I have to say, if the church won't do that job, if they won't go out and make Jesus known through how they live and through love and care and support in often desperate situations people are in sickness and disease and addictions and so on, well, God can do it without the church. He can do it without us. He can do it without me.
I think that people are ready to receive them, and therefore when they see something that will fit the psychological hole in their soul, then they will go for it, and they will interpret it as something divine, and it will comfort them. But I think that really the need is theirs, and they are, if you like, seeking them out. And really, I think they're on cloud nine.
Well, I don't think we should be surprised that people are looking for images which help them believe that they're not alone in the universe. My guess is that most people are looking for some spiritual dimension to their lives, which is beyond exercise, it's beyond beauty, it's beyond friendships. It's something which you can't quite put into words. And whilst this sort of thing can attract the flakes, inevitably, my guess is that most of the people on your programme will, to all intents and purposes, be professional people, sensible people, who are profoundly moved by these images. So my guess is there is something actually happening here.
Inside this suburban home in Hebburn, something quite strange is happening. In the past few days, more than 200 people have gathered to stare at the walls.
In Newcastle, another image, this time on the interior wall of a house during redecoration.
What people are seeing is a type of face along here. This is the face with an eye, aquiline nose, either headdress or crown of thorns, as has been variously interpreted, hair, the arm, and built up to a sleeve. And this has been variously taken...
Mainstream churches may shy away from lending credibility to such images, and sceptics may find it easy to mock. But for many who come face to face with them, seeing is believing.
Even if I, as a psychologist and a scientist, believe that these images of God can be explained purely by psychology, that is in no way to belittle the experience. These experiences are extremely profound for the people who are having them, and often extremely positive. People feel much better for them, it gives them hope, and perhaps these powerful, profound experiences have a much more positive effect on their lives than practically anything else.
The ultimate in scientific reductionism is to dismiss all of this. It has no meaning. These people are deluding themselves. This is not Christ, this is not his image, and everything that they've read into it is simply an act of imagination, and therefore of no consequence. Which, if I may say so, is a very short-sighted view, because if there's one thing that's shaped human history, human evolution, it's the imagination. What we believe we can do, what we are inspired to do. And this can be for good or bad.
When we come into this church, we come into the presence of Christ. And whether we see him visually or whether we experience him in our hearts and lives, he is here.